Good evening, Tony Johnson with Campus Wide, produced for Radio UNE and also broadcast on 2ARM. Tonight, we look at some of the views and criticisms put forward by Tony Abbott, President of Sydney University SRC. As President of the SRC, he should have the interest of students at heart and be involved in students' welfare and position. I think you should find his comments of interest.
Your political views are obviously contrary to those held by the larger part of the organisation you represent, although of course you are democratically elected. Also, I've noticed around this campus a fair amount of graffiti directed against you, often in a fairly obscene manner. It must be difficult to be president in such an atmosphere. Did you realise this before you were nominated?
Well, I've always known, or I soon found out anyway, that student politics was a rather unpleasant environment at a campus like Sydney University, and I think at Sydney it would probably be quite a bit different from what it's like at UNE actually, because at Sydney University one tends to get the type of person who is terribly thrusting and ambitious and who would like to really make a big splash in the world, in public life as it were. They tend to go to a university like Sydney rather than a country campus like UNE. And when you get that sort of person involved in the SRC, well then it makes for a much more, some might call it lively environment, others, and I'd certainly be in this number, would call it an unpleasant environment. And so yes, it certainly is rather unpleasant. I've always known since I've been involved that this is exactly what it's like, but I think that I've been involved in student politics in spite of that, and I'll continue to be involved for a period yet.
Do you enjoy the turmoil?
Well, yeah, I guess I've got to admit it. Basically, the cut and thrust of student politics in a place like this, I do find stimulating.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's also off-putting at times, but I guess when taken in sum, I would have to admit it. But I do enjoy it, basically.
What do you see is wrong about the present system of student representation?
I think the problem is, and it's certainly not confined to Sydney University, it's common to all the campuses in this country, that all students are being levied to support political organisations in which only a small percentage of students are interested. Now, it's obvious from the turnout in campus elections that most students couldn't give a damn, basically, about their SRC, and they don't think that the SRC is at all relevant to their daily lives. I don't know what the situation's like up at UNE, but at Sydney University, the highest number we've ever had in any SRC election voting was 30%. Now, that was hailed as a triumph for participatory democracy. Now, I tend to feel that if that's the best that these SRCs and what have you can do, well, then they certainly can't justify continued compulsory fees. And if I could at this point make one distinction between student organisations and trade unions, I'd rather not express any opinion here and now about compulsory trade unionism. But what I would say is that there is certainly a huge difference between trade unions and student unions, and whatever one might think about compulsory trade unionism, one can certainly not justify student unionism as a compulsory situation, because the student unions just aren't working in the same sort of environment as trade unions are.
But students have problems just as much as labourers do.
They have problems, but they're problems of a fundamentally different nature and order. You see, what's happening in the economic environment, in the marketplace, you have workers and employers involved in what amounts to a struggle for economic survival. But if you look, at the other hand, at students and administrations, there is no clash of economic interests between the students and the people who run the universities. And I think this is the fundamental difference between the two situations. And I think that eliminates the need for a compulsorily funded student political organisation.
Shouldn't the student organisation be directed against the people, such as the government, who are not giving them enough money to survive?
I do not think that students are being victimised by the government. I don't think the government has any real interest in victimising students in anything like the same way that employers might have an interest in putting the knife into employees. So I don't think that the mere fact that the government might do something against students justifies compulsory student unionism, because it's just not. Let's face it, students have just as much say in the government as any other group in the community through their vote.
You claim that there's room in the education system for further cuts. Well, how do you explain this?
Well, you up at UNE probably would not suffer from this problem, being, I think, an agriculturally oriented university. Certainly you used to be. I think you probably still are. But at Sydney University, we've always had a penchant for getting involved in esoterica and what one might say trivial extravagance, and particularly in the arts and economics faculties, there's an awful lot of courses here which can only be described as so much nonsense. For instance, the general philosophy course, aesthetics course, is devoted entirely to a study of punk rock. However enjoyable that might be, it doesn't really seem a suitable subject for a course leading to a Bachelor of Arts degree. In the government department, for instance, you have extensive courses on things like feminism and the political exploitation of women and what have you, and quite frankly I think that these courses are attempts, not only are they trivial, but they are attempts by unscrupulous academics to impose simplistic ideological solutions upon students, as it were, to make students the cannon fodder for their own private versions of the revolution. And I think that if there were further cuts to the education budget, well then we would certainly see the universities cracking down on that sort of course. The fact that they can offer that sort of course at the moment is, to me, proof that there is room for further cuts.
You also suggest cutting out political economy.
That's right.
Do you see courses such as political economy and punk rock and general philosophy as basically being Marxist orientated?
Well, I don't know about the punk rock. Perhaps that's ideologically neutral, who knows. But certainly political economy and general philosophy are thinly disguised attempts by, as I said, unscrupulous people to impose a very simplistic and, in fact, I believe, quite wrong ideological solution on students.
Are minority sectors within the university, such as feminists and homosexuals and ethnic groups, being poorly represented?
Well, again, it's I'm very wary, and as I said, I find it a little alarming that
Within the
people
university
today tend to think of themselves not so much as members of the community, but as women, blacks, migrants, homosexuals, or whatever. Similarly, people on campus don't seem to think of themselves as students, but they very often seem to think of themselves, as you said, as women, homosexuals, and what have you. Now, it seems to me that if there is adequate representation for students as a whole, well then there will, as it were, be adequate representation for all these other groups.
Do you feel that those who do not have the means should receive financial aid?
Well, I think it's a basic, it's something very basic to a society such as ours, that all people should have equal opportunity, and whether the universities be run as they are at present in a system whereby the government simply grants money to the universities, or whether in fact the government was to reintroduce fees or something like that, I think certainly there should be provision for the severely underprivileged to get to university for free, whether the government pays their fees or gives them tertiary assistance, as in the present case. I don't think is terribly material, but I would certainly most strongly support the idea that those who are underprivileged should certainly have the state intervene to try and correct that situation, so that if they are sufficiently capable in themselves, the fact that they were born into a poor family will not permanently disadvantage them.
But only 25% of university students are on Ts, and you're suggesting a voluntary contribution scheme to that SRC.
That's right.
Well, if only 25% of students require this money, and they need the money to support a campaign, not many people are going to donate to it, are they?
Well, I think the 25% who are on Ts would certainly donate to it. In fact, perhaps they might donate an awful lot more than the SRC currently receives as a compulsory fee from everyone. But the point I would make is that that the people attending universities are, according to sociological studies and statistics, an overwhelmingly middle-class group. Now, in that society, that means a fairly well-off group, and I do not think that the government should really be going around giving all students handouts to study.
Well, how do you see the future for the average student anyway?
I would like to see the universities brought back to a situation where they cherished excellence and learning, and where they actually inculcated into students a real sense, a real love, as it were, of truth and learning and what have you. And I think that with the enormous expansion of the universities, this has been lost to some extent. I'd also like to see a situation where all students were assured of jobs when they left university. Now, I don't think one can say, well, society must change to suit the universities. I think one's got to be realistic and say that the universities must change to suit society. So not only would I like to see the universities revert back to this quest and hunger for excellence and learning, but I would also like to see the numbers at university reduced and the courses made perhaps more attractive to employers, so that everyone will have a job when they leave. I would like to see the universities prepare students more than they are at the moment to take a role in changing our society, not into some Marxist utopia, because I don't think that can exist, but into a society which is based on a genuinely Christian principle, and into a society where every man is free to develop, every man and woman, I suppose I should add, is free to develop his or her unique talents in the way they best see fit as individuals.
How do you see the role of women in society in particular?
Well, I see women as having an equal opportunity in every area as men have, and just as I think all groups should have an equal opportunity. Mind you, I think that I must add the proviso that while I think men and women are equal, they are also different. And I think that it's inevitable, and I don't think it's a bad thing at all, that we will always have, say, more women doing things like physiotherapy, and an enormous number of women simply doing housework, and probably more men doing things like digging ditches and that style of thing.
Tony Abbott, President of Sydney University SRC, speaking with Stephen Horrocks.